Tonight, you're about to discover something shocking about your ancestors, something that scientists kept quiet for decades, something that will change how you see human survival forever. But before we begin this journey, if you're ready to explore the darkest, coldest chapter of human history with me, gently tap that like button. And if you want these deep sleep stories to continue, hit subscribe. Your support keeps these journeys alive. Now, let me ask you something strange. What if I told you that 15,000 years ago, a small band of humans discovered a heating secret so effective that archaeologists are still trying to figure out how it worked? What if surviving winter wasn't just about fire and fur, but about something far more ingenious that we've only recently begun to understand? You're about to find out. It's 15,000 years before our time. The place is what will one day be called France, but right now it's a frozen wasteland that shouldn't support human life at all. The glaciers are retreating, but winter still kills without mercy. The temperature drops to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Wolves hunt in packs of 20, and cave bears, 3 times larger than modern bears, still roam the landscape. You wake before dawn, but you don't know. It's dawn because inside this shelter there's only darkness. Complete, absolute darkness, broken only by the faint red glow of embers that must, absolutely must, still be alive. Your first sensation is cold pressing against your face like an icy hand. Your second sensation is fear. Real, primal fear, because if those embers have died, if the fire is gone, your chances of surviving the next hour have just dropped dramatically. You lie perfectly still listening. Around you, 12 other people breathe in the darkness. Some breath steady and deep. Others rattle and wheeze because winter colds become winter pneumonia, and winter pneumonia becomes death. 3 people in your band are already sick. One is a child whose cough sounds worse each day. The question nobody speaks aloud: who will survive until spring? Your fingers are numb despite being tucked under your arms all night. Your toes feel like blocks of ice inside fur-wrapped feet. Your face stings where exposed skin met freezing air, and your bones ache with a deep, penetrating cold that no amount of furs can fully block. But you're alive, for now. Here's what scientists discovered that shocked them. Paleolithic people weren't just surviving these winters. In some shelters, they were actually comfortable. They had heating systems so sophisticated that when archaeologists first found the evidence, they assumed it was from a later period. It couldn't possibly be from the Ice Age. They were wrong. You push yourself up slowly. Every movement hurts. Your shoulders throb from yesterday's wood hauling. Your back is stiff from sleeping on frozen ground. Your hands are cracked and bleeding from working with frozen materials in sub-zero temperatures. Around you, others are stirring. An old woman coughs, a wet rattling sound that makes everyone tense. A baby whimpers and is quickly soothed by its mother's breast. A man groans as he tries to straighten legs that have cramped during the night. The hearth. You must check the hearth. You crawl toward the faint glow, your heart pounding. The entire band depends on this moment. If the fire is dead, you'll need to restart it using friction or striking flint against pyrite. In this cold with numb fingers, that could take an hour of increasing cold, of bodies losing precious heat, of risk spiraling upward. But as you reach the hearth and gently brush away the ash covering, you see it. The beautiful, blessed glow of living coals. Deep orange, radiating heat, waiting to be for. Relief floods through you like warmth itself. You've survived another night. Chapter 2. The Morning Ritual, Fire or Death. Here's something that will surprise you. Ancient people weren't just building random fires and hoping for the best. They had developed fire management techniques so advanced that modern survival experts study their methods. They understood thermal mass, they understood airflow, they understood fuel efficiency in ways that took modern science centuries to figure out. Let me show you what your ancestor knows that you've forgotten. You reach for the kindling bundle, prepared last night with obsessive care. Dry birch bark that peels like paper and catches fire with barely a spark. Tiny twigs, no thicker than your finger, arranged by size. Small branches split to expose dry interior wood. Everything organised, everything ready, because morning fire revival is too critical to leave to chance. You place the birch bark over the coals. Nothing happens. You wait, breathing softly, not wanting to disturb the delicate moment. Then a thin curl of smoke rises. The bark begins to blacken at the edges. A tiny flame appears, no bigger than your fingernail. This is the moment. This single flame is the difference between life and death. You lean close, blowing gently on the nascent fire. Not too hard or you'll scatter the coals, not too soft or the flame will die for lack of oxygen. Just right. A technique you learned as a child, watching your mother, watching the elders, learning through observation what could never be explained in words. The flame grows, the bark catches fully. You add the smallest toy, building a teepee structure that allows air to circulate. The flames spread. Hungry, eager, heat begins to radiate outward. Now the small branches, you add them carefully, watching how the fire responds, adjusting your additions based on flame colour and smoke production. Too much smoke means inadequate air. Clear flames mean good combustion. Within 5 minutes the fire is established. Strong, steady, pushing warmth out into the cold shelter. Around you, people begin to move toward the hearth like flowers turning toward the sun. Hands extended, seeking warmth. Bodies huddled close, but not too close. Everyone knows the invisible circles around the fire. The inner ring where heat becomes discomfort. The perfect middle ring where warmth is maximum. And the outer ring where cold still dominates. But here's where it gets interesting, where the mystery begins. Why are some people moving to the inner ring, the hottest zone, while others stay back? Why does the old woman get help to the best position while young, strong hunters sit further out? Who decides who gets warmth? That question, that simple question about who sits where, reveals secrets about Ice Age society that archaeologists are still debating today. Secrets about power, about value, about who mattered and who didn't in a world where every calorie of warmth meant survival. Before we go deeper into that mystery, let me ask you this. Are you enjoying this journey so far? If you are, leave a comment below telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love knowing that we're connected across the world through these ancient stories. The fire crackles, sending sparks upward into the darkness. You watch them rise, tiny orange stars that die before reaching the shelter's roof. The smoke spirals upward, following paths that have been carefully designed, though you don't think of it as design. You think of it as the way things are done, the accumulated wisdom of generations. But someone figured it out first. Someone noticed that positioning the hearth in exactly this spot, this specific distance from the back wall, with the opening oriented in precisely this direction, created a draft that pulled smoke upward and outward while reflecting heat inward. That someone was a genius, an Ice Age engineer whose name is lost forever, but whose innovation saved countless lives. You are the inheritor of that genius. You maintain their invention without knowing you're doing it, just as you breathe without thinking about breathing. And now, as dawn's first grey light begins to seep through gaps in the hide walls, you face the day's first critical decision. Food or fuel, Chapter 3: The Fuel Crisis. The wood pile is low, dangerously low. You stare at the remaining fuel and make rapid calculations that would impress a modern logistics expert. How many pieces do you need to maintain heat through today? How much extra for cooking? What if the weather turns worse and you can't gather tomorrow? What if someone gets sick and needs extra warmth? The mathematics of survival are brutal and unforgiving. Here's what nobody tells you about Ice Age life. It wasn't the cold that killed most people. It was exhaustion. The endless, grinding exhaustion of never having enough. Never enough food, never enough fuel, never enough warmth, never enough what? Your body constantly working at its maximum just to maintain basic survival, burning through calories faster than you can replace them, wearing down like a tool used, beyond its limits. You're hungry right now. You've been hungry for 3 months, since autumn's abundance faded into winter's scarcity. Not starving, not yet, but hungry in a deep, gnawing way that never quite goes away. Your body has consumed its fat reserves. Your face is gaunt. Your ribs are visible. Your muscles have thinned. Everyone looks like this in late winter. Everyone becomes a shadow of their summer self. The woman called Kara is stirring near the northern wall. You can barely see her in the dim light, but you know it's her by the way she moves, by the particular rhythm of her morning routine. She's checking the walls again, running her hands along seams, feeling for drafts that weren't there yesterday. Kara's obsessed with the walls, has been for years. While others focus on hunting or gathering, Kara focuses on shelter. She thinks about walls the way hunters think about game trails. She dreams about insulation techniques. She experiments constantly. Some people think she's strange. Others think she's brilliant. Everyone agrees that shelters are warmer when Kara works on them. But here's the mystery that scientists puzzle over. Was Kara unusual? Or were there thousands of Karas across the Ice Age world, each in their own band, each quietly innovating, each contributing small improvements that accumulated into revolutionary change? We'll never know their names, we'll never know their faces, but we know they existed because the evidence is literally buried in the ground, waiting for archaeologists to find it. And what archaeologists found changes everything we thought we knew about primitive people. You pull on your outer furs, preparing for the journey outside. The entrance is covered with the heavy hide that traps heat inside while blocking wind from entering directly. Someone, probably Kara, modified the entrance last month, adding a second hide that creates an air gap. A primitive airlock that significantly reduces heat loss when people go in and out. Such a simple idea, such a profound effect. You push through the hides and step into the world outside. The cold hits you like a physical blow. The air is so cold it burns your lungs when you breathe. Your eyes water immediately, tears freezing on your eyelashes. Your exposed face goes numb within seconds. The landscape is beautiful and terrifying. Snow covers everything in an endless white expanse that reflects the weak dawn light. The sky is pale grey, heavy with the promise of more snow. In the distance, a line of dark trees marks a small forest grove. That's where you're heading. That's where the fuel is if you can find it. But between here and there is 400 meters of open ground. And you're not alone out here. You scan the landscape carefully, looking for movement, for tracks, for any sign of the predators that hunt these plains. Wolves are the constant danger. They hunt in large packs during winter, taking down prey much larger than themselves. A human alone in the open is vulnerable. A human carrying wood, distracted and burdened, is prey. This is the calculation nobody modern understands. Every time you leave shelter, you risk death. Every simple task, gathering wood, fetching water, checking traps, becomes a potentially fatal expedition. Your ancestors lived with risk levels that would paralyze most modern people. You begin walking, your feet crunching through the crusty snow. Each step is deliberate, placed carefully to avoid hidden ice or rocks that could turn an ankle. An injury out here alone could be fatal. You carry a spear, not for hunting but for defense. The sharpened flint point could save your life if wolves appear. The cold is already seeping through your layers. You're wearing a leather tunic, a fur cloak, hide leggings, and fur-wrapped feet. But it's not enough. It's never enough. The cold finds every gap, every seam, every place where materials don't quite meet. You walk faster, generating heat through movement, knowing that stopping means rapid heat loss. The question repeats in your mind with every step. Will there be enough wood? Will the dry branches still be accessible under the snow? Will you find fuel before your body loses too much heat? And beneath that question lurks another, darker one. Will you make it back? Chapter 4. Secrets of the Shelter Walls. While you're out there gathering fuel, risking your life for wood, let me tell you something that will blow your mind about that shelter you left behind. For over 100 years, archaeologists assumed they understood Paleolithic shelters. Simple structures, they said. Basic technology. People survived through toughness, not intelligence. They were completely wrong. In 1998, a team excavating a rock shelter in southern France found something that didn't make sense. Between layers of hide that had miraculously preserved in permafrost conditions, they found something unexpected, an air gap. A deliberate space precisely maintained that created a double-wall insulation system. The same principle we use in modern double-paned windows, 15,000 years earlier. But it gets stranger. When they analysed the materials used to seal gaps between hides, they found something shocking, a compound mixture of animal fat, plant resins, and crushed charcoal that created a flexible, waterproof insulating sealant with properties similar to modern caulking. Someone invented caulk in the Ice Age, and not just in one place. They found evidence of similar compounds in sites across Europe and Asia. Your shelter, the one you woke up in this morning, contains dozens of such innovations. Inventions so clever that modern survival experts study them. Techniques so effective that they challenge our understanding of primitive technology. Let me tell you about the walls you take for granted. The outer layer is reindeer hide, thick and durable, with the fur left on for added insulation. But it's not just one hide, it's multiple hides, carefully sewn together with waterproof seams, creating a large enough covering to enclose the entire front of the shelter. The stitching itself is remarkable. Using sinew thread and bone needles, someone created seams that are simultaneously flexible and waterproof. The technique involves overlapping edges and using a specific stitch pattern that allows the material to expand and contract with temperature changes without creating gaps. Behind the outer hide layer is a second layer, but here's where it gets interesting. The second layer isn't hide, it's woven grass mats, thick and tightly woven, creating an insulating barrier that traps air between the two layers. Air is the secret. Dead air space is one of nature's best insulators. Modern sleeping bags use the same principle. So do modern homes. But someone figured this out 15,000 years ago, probably through patient experimentation, probably through observing how different configurations retained heat differently. Between the hide and the grass mats, someone stuffed additional insulation, dried moss mixed with animal hair. This combination creates a thick, insulating barrier that dramatically reduces heat loss through the walls. But the walls are just the beginning. The roof structure is even more sophisticated. Wooden poles arch overhead, their ends wedged into cracks in the rock face, creating a framework that can support significant weight. Over these poles, someone has layered birch bark, which is naturally waterproof. Over the bark, more hides. Over the hides, a thick layer of sod, cut in blocks and carefully fitted together. The sod serves multiple purposes. It adds insulation, it adds weight to hold everything down in strong winds, and it absorbs moisture, preventing condensation from dripping inside. Think about that. Someone understood moisture management well enough to build a breathable roof system that prevented internal condensation while blocking external precipitation. And here's the most shocking part. The entire structure is designed to be repairable. Sections can be replaced without dismantling everything. Worn-out hides can be swapped for fresh ones. Damaged seams can be restitched. The moss insulation can be refreshed. Your shelter is not a primitive hut. It's an engineered dwelling with maintainable components. It's Ice Age technology that works. But if you want to understand who invented this, who made these innovations possible, we need to talk about Kara. Chapter 5. When Winter Kills, A Child's Last Night. If you're feeling comfortable right now, settled into your warm bed, this next part might disturb you. But it's important. It's part of the real story. The story we can't look away from if we want to understand what survival really meant. 2 winters ago, a child died in your shelter. Her name doesn't matter anymore because nobody speaks it. Speaking the names of the dead is forbidden. It might call their spirits back, might disturb their journey to wherever the dead go. So she's just the child who died in the cold winter, and everyone knows which winter that was and which child it means. She was 6 years old, maybe 7. Nobody counted precisely. She had dark eyes and a quick laugh, and she loved to sit close to the fire, closer than anyone else could tolerate, letting the heat bake her face until her cheeks glowed red. The sickness started as a cough, just a small cough, the kind everyone gets in winter when smoke irritates throats and cold air burns lungs. Nobody worried at first. Coughs were normal. They passed. But this one didn't pass. The cough grew worse, deeper, wetter. The child started struggling to breathe, her small chest heaving with effort, each breath a labour that exhausted her. Fever came next, burning through her small body, consuming her from the inside. Kara tried everything. She moved the child closer to the fire, to the warmest position right next to the coals. She wrapped her in the thickest furs. She prepared special foods, soft and easy to swallow. She made steam by heating stones and dripping water on them, hoping the moisture would ease the child's breathing. The shaman performed rituals, chanting, rattling, appealing to spirits. The child's mother never left her side, holding her through the long nights, rocking her, singing softly even as her own voice broke with exhaustion and grief. But nothing worked. Nothing could work because this was pneumonia, and pneumonia in Ice Age winter was a death sentence. On the 4th night, the child's breathing changed. It became shallow, rapid, desperate. Everyone in the shelter knew what that meant. Death was coming. Death was already in the shelter, hovering close, waiting. The child died just before dawn, in that darkest hour when night is coldest and spirits are closest. She died in her mother's arms, her last breath a soft rattle that cut through the silence like a blade. The sound the mother made still haunts the shelter. It wasn't quite a scream, it wasn't quite a sob, it was something beyond words, beyond human sounds, something pulled from the deepest part of grief where language doesn't exist. Everyone wept. Even the strongest hunters wept because the child had been everyone's child, had been the band's future, had been light and laughter in the cold darkness. And Kara wept hardest of all. Because Kara knew something the others didn't. The shelter had failed. Not completely, not catastrophically, but enough. There had been a draft, a persistent cold spot near where the child slept. Kara had noticed it but hadn't fixed it yet, had been planning to patch it but hadn't gotten around to it, had thought it could wait. It couldn't wait. That draft had made the child colder than she needed to be. That extra cold had weakened her, had made her more vulnerable to the sickness that killed her. Would she have survived if the shelter had been perfectly sealed? Maybe, maybe not. Pneumonia killed children even in warm conditions, but maybe. Maybe if Kara had acted sooner, had patched that draft immediately instead of waiting, maybe the child would still be alive. Kara doesn't know. We'll never know, and that uncertainty is a weight she carries every single day. Here's what changed after that death. Kara became obsessed, absolutely, completely obsessed with shelter improvement. She stopped seeing the walls as good enough. She started seeing every gap, every draft, every inefficiency as a potential killer. She began checking the walls multiple times per day. She started experimenting with new sealing techniques. She pressured others to help her implement modifications. She became, in some ways, difficult, demanding, uncompromising in her insistence that the shelter could be better, must be better, would be better. Some people resented it, thought she was overreacting, thought she was trying to control something that couldn't be controlled, trying to prevent death through architecture when death came anyway. Always, eventually. But others understood. Others saw that Kara was channeling her grief into purpose, was transforming her failure into determination, was refusing to let the child's death be meaningless. And the shelter did become warmer, significantly warmer. The modifications Kara implemented after that winter, the double-layer walls, the improved ceiling compounds, the better ventilation system, all of them added up to a measurably more comfortable living space. Last winter, no children died. 3 elderly people passed, but they were old, expected. Their deaths were sad but natural. No children, no preventable deaths from cold-related illness. Kara doesn't talk about that, doesn't take credit, doesn't claim her innovation saved lives. But everyone knows. Everyone understands that the warmth they feel, the comfort that keeps children healthy through winter, exists because Kara refused to accept death as inevitable. This is what heroism looked like in the Ice Age. Not glory, not fame, just obsessive attention to details, just relentless improvement, just refusing to accept that good enough is actually good enough when lives are at stake. If you're moved by Kara's story, by the way one person's determination changed everything for their community, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're going even deeper into mysteries about Ice Age survival that will shock you. Chapter 6: The Woman Who Changed Everything. Let me tell you something that archaeologists don't like to admit. They have no idea who invented most survival technologies. Fire management, unknown inventor. Clothing, unknown inventor. Shelter techniques, unknown inventor. History remembers kings and warriors. It forgets the thousands of ordinary people whose small innovations literally made civilization possible. But sometimes, very rarely, we get glimpses. In northern Spain, archaeologists found a burial that changed everything. A woman, approximately 35 years, old, buried with honours usually reserved for hunters or shamans. But she wasn't buried with weapons or ritual objects. She was buried with tools, specialised tools, scraping tools, stitching tools, tools for working hides and processing materials, and next to her were samples. Samples of different materials, different combinations, different experimental techniques for creating insulated coverings. She was an innovator, an engineer, someone whose band valued her mind enough to honor her in death with the tools of her trade. That burial proves that people like Kara existed, that ancient societies recognized and honored innovation, that the progress we see in the archaeological record wasn't random or accidental, but was driven by specific individuals who thought deeply about problems and developed solutions. Your Kara is one of those people. Let me show you who she really is. Kara is 32 winters old. She has lived longer than most women in your band, longer than to most people, period. She has survived 3 near-fatal illnesses, 2 serious injuries, and countless winters that killed others. She is thin but strong, weathered but vital. She was not born innovative. She learned it. As a child, Kara was unremarkable. Average at gathering, adequate at hide processing, mediocre at crafts. She showed no special talents, no obvious gifts. Other children were stronger, faster, more skilled. But Kara had something else. She noticed things. She noticed that some shelters were warmer than others, even when they seemed similar. She noticed that certain materials retained heat better than others. She noticed patterns in how wind moved, how smoke behaved, how cold penetrated structures. She didn't just notice, she asked why. Why is this shelter warmer? Why does smoke spiral that way? Why do some seams leak while others hold? Why? 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 The endless questions of someone who refuses to accept the world as given, who insists on understanding mechanisms and principles. The elders found her questions annoying. They would answer, because that's how it's done, or because the spirits will it. But those answers didn't satisfy Kara. She kept asking, kept observing, kept thinking. When she was 15, she made her first innovation. Small, almost insignificant. She noticed that hides dried by the fire became stiffer than hides dried slowly in the shade. She experimented with different drying techniques and discovered that hides dried with a specific moisture level retained flexibility while still becoming waterproof. Nobody cared. It seemed trivial. But Kara cared because she had discovered a principle. Processing matters. How you treat materials affects their properties. Simple, obvious in retrospect, but revolutionary in implication. She started experimenting with everything. Different stitching patterns, different insulating materials, different wall configurations. Most experiments failed. Some failed spectacularly, creating leaks or weak spots that made things worse. But some worked. Some worked brilliantly. By her mid-20s, Kara had developed a reputation. People came to her with shelter problems. They asked her opinion before making modifications. They recognized that she understood something important about staying warm, something beyond the obvious, something that came from years of observation and experimentation. Then the child died, and everything changed. After that death, Kara's innovations accelerated. She stopped being cautious, stopped worrying about whether people would accept her ideas, stopped caring if her experiments seemed strange. She proposed the double wall system and convinced the band to implement it despite resistance. She developed the ceiling compound after dozens of failed attempts. She redesigned the ventilation system, the entrance configuration, the sleeping arrangements. Within 2 years, your shelter became the warmest structure any neighbouring band had ever encountered. People from other groups started visiting, not just to trade, but to observe, to learn, to copy Kara's techniques. Her innovations spread, not through writing or formal teaching, but through observation and imitation. Someone from another band would see the double wall system and think, we should try that. They would implement their own version, maybe adding their own modifications. Those modifications might spread further, evolving as they went. This is how technology advanced in the Paleolithic, not through institutions or formal research, but through individual innovators like Kara, whose ideas spread organically through social networks, improving and adapting with each transmission. But here's what makes Kara truly remarkable. She shares everything. She teaches anyone who wants to learn. She doesn't hoard knowledge or try to maintain exclusive expertise. There's a young woman, Tassa, who follows Kara everywhere, absorbing every technique, asking endless questions. Kara is patient with her in ways she's patient with no one else. She demonstrates methods repeatedly. She encourages experimentation. She praises successes and helps analyze failures. Kara is creating the next generation of innovators. She is ensuring that her knowledge survives her, that the improvement she's made will persist and continue to evolve. This is the real genius, not just innovating, but transmitting, not just discovering, but teaching, not just improving your own life, but improving the lives of everyone who comes after you. When Kara dies, and she will die because everyone does, her innovations will continue. The double wall system will persist. The sealing techniques will spread. The accumulated wisdom she's developed will be passed down through Tessa and others like her, becoming part of the common knowledge that everyone takes for granted. This is how humanity survives. One innovator at a time, one improvement at a time, one transmission of knowledge at a time, building slowly, patiently, relentlessly toward a future where winter is no longer a death sentence. If you're inspired by this story of innovation and teaching, leave a comment telling me about someone who taught you something important. Who was your Kara? Who changed how you see the world? Chapter 7: The Shaman's Dangerous Game. Game. But not everyone in your band contributes through innovation. Some contribute through different means that are far more controversial, means that raise questions we're still debating today about the nature of belief, power, and survival. Let me introduce you to Domar. Domar sleeps in a private alcove separated from the common sleeping area by hanging hides. His space is warmer than yours. He eats better than you. He works less than you. And everyone accepts this arrangement because Domar is the shaman, the spiritual mediator, the one who speaks with the spirits that control whether animals come to hunters and whether winter ends or continues forever. But here's the controversial question. Is Domar a fraud? Does he actually possess spiritual powers? Or is he just a skilled performer who has figured out how to leverage people's fears and beliefs into personal privilege? The answer is complicated, more complicated than you might think. Watch Domar during a hunting ritual. The ceremony begins at dusk. Domar emerges from his alcove wearing his ceremonial cape, made from the hide of a cave bear he supposedly killed in his youth, though nobody alive now was there to witness it. His face is painted with red ochre in patterns that supposedly connect him to the animal spirits. He begins to chant. His voice is deep, rhythmic, hypnotic. The chant has no words you understand, or if it has words, they're in an old language that only shamans know. The rhythm pulls at something deep in your mind, something below consciousness, something that makes your heart beat in time with his voice. He dances around the fire, his movements sharp and sudden, mimicking animals, becoming them. He's a reindeer, graceful and alert. He's a wolf, predatory and fierce. He's a bear, massive and powerful. His body transforms through movement, and for those watching, the line between human and animal blurs. Then he enters trance, or appears to. His eyes roll back. His body goes rigid. He falls to the ground, twitching, making sounds that aren't quite human. This is the moment when he supposedly travels to the spirit world, when he negotiates with the animal spirits, when he learns where the herds are and whether they'll allow themselves to be hunted, it's terrifying and mesmerizing. Everyone watches in silence, barely breathing, because if you disturb a shaman during trance, his spirit might not find its way back to his body and he'll die, and then the band will be cursed forever. Finally, Domar returns, his eyes open. He gasps as if drowning and suddenly finding air. He sits up slowly, disoriented, weak. Someone offers him water. Someone else wraps a hide around his shoulders. When he speaks, his voice is rough, exhausted. He tells you what the spirit said. The reindeer herd is 3 days' walk to the northwest. They're healthy and abundant, but the spirits demand an offering. A portion of the first kill must be left for them, placed on a specific stone with ceremonial prayers. The hunters prepare to leave. They're confident now. Domar has given them direction. The spirits have blessed the hunt. And here's where it gets interesting. The hunt succeeds. 3 days' walk to the northwest, exactly where Domar said. The hunters find a reindeer herd. They make a kill. They remember to leave the offering. So did the spirits actually speak to Domar? Or did Domar use his extensive knowledge of animal patterns, seasonal movements, and landscape features to make an educated guess about where reindeer would be, then dress it up in spiritual language that gave hunters confidence and created social cohesion around the hunt? Modern anthropologists argue about this endlessly. Some say shamans were deliberate frauds. Others say they genuinely believed in their powers and experienced real altered states. Others say it doesn't matter because the social function was real regardless of the mechanism. But what do you think? You've seen Domar perform dozens of rituals. You've seen Hunt succeed after his blessings and fail despite them. You've seen him cure people with herbs and prayers, and you've seen people die despite his best efforts. Is he a fraud? A fool? A skilled observer who understands psychology and ecology? A genuine spiritual adept? Something in between? Here's what makes you uncomfortable. Domar lives better than you. His alcove is warmer, his food portions are larger, he works less hard, and all of this is justified by his supposedly special relationship with spirits that may or may not exist. If spirits are real and Domar can actually communicate with them, then his privilege is justified. He provides a service nobody else can provide. But if spirits aren't real, if Domar is just performing elaborate theatre, then his privilege is exploitation. He's living off your labour while contributing nothing of actual value. Which is it? You don't know, you'll never know, because there's no way to prove it either way. And that uncertainty, that fundamental inability to verify or falsify spiritual claims, is what makes shamanism such an effective system for maintaining privilege. Domar doesn't have to prove anything, doesn't have to demonstrate objective effectiveness. If a hunt succeeds, his ritual worked. If a hunt fails, you didn't perform the offerings correctly, or the spirits were angry about something else, or you weren't pure enough in your intentions. The system is unfalsifiable. It can't be proven wrong, and that makes it incredibly powerful and incredibly resistant to challenge. But here's what's truly interesting. Even if Domar is a complete fraud, even if spirits don't exist and he's just making everything up, he might still be providing value. The confidence hunters feel after his rituals is real and might make them more effective. The social cohesion created by shared ceremony is real and strengthens the band. The psychological comfort people derive from believing someone can negotiate with the forces beyond human control is real and might reduce anxiety enough to improve health. Placebo effects are effects. Even if the mechanism is fake, if the outcome is positive, does it matter? This is the dangerous question that makes some people uncomfortable. Can beneficial lies be justified? If Domar's rituals keep people hopeful through winter's darkest months, if his performances provide meaning and structure, If his supposed spiritual power gives the band confidence that improves their actual survival chances, then is he actually a fraud? Or is he a skilled practitioner of something we might call applied mythology, using the human tendency toward belief to create real psychological benefits? I can't answer that for you. People have debated questions like this for thousands of years, and we're no closer to consensus now than we were in the Ice Age. But think about it as you drift towards sleep. Think about the role of belief in survival. Think about whether hope built on possibly false foundations is better than hopeless built on uncomfortable truths. And if this question fascinates you, if it makes you want to think deeper about belief and survival, then subscribe, because we're going to explore even stranger territories in the archaeological evidence. Chapter 8: Ancient Architects. What bones reveal. Now let me show you something that will completely change how you think about Ice Age people. Something that archaeologists found that shocked the scientific community and caused heated debates that continue to this day. In 1965, Soviet archaeologists excavating a site in Ukraine found something extraordinary. At first, they thought it was a natural formation, maybe an erosion pattern or an accumulation of bones from repeated flooding. They were wrong. What they had found was a house, an actual constructed dwelling, made entirely from mammoth bones, not a few bones arranged as supports, not a simple framework. An entire structure, 16 feet in diameter, using the bones of nearly 100 mammoths. Skulls formed the base. Long bones were stacked to create walls. Tusks arched overhead to support a roof that was probably covered with hides. The structure was sophisticated. It had a doorway, a hearth positioned for optimal heat distribution, and evidence of multiple construction phases suggesting it was maintained and repaired over extended periods. This single discovery revolutionized Ice Age archaeology, because building such a structure required planning, cooperation, engineering knowledge, and social organization far beyond what anyone had assumed primitive humans possessed. Think about what it takes to build a mammoth bone house. First, you need to acquire nearly 100 mammoths worth of bones. You're not killing 100 mammoths, that's impossible. You're collecting bones from natural death sites, from animals that died from various causes over years or decades. This means you need to know where such sites are. You need to return to them repeatedly. You need to remember locations and plan trips specifically for bone collection. That requires mental maps, seasonal planning, and probably intergenerational knowledge transmission. Then you need to transport the bones. A mammoth skull weighs up to 400 pounds. A femur might weigh 200 pounds. You're moving tons of material, probably over significant distances, using only human muscle power and maybe simple sleds. This requires organization. Multiple people working together, coordinated effort, planning who carries what, how many trips are needed, where rest stops should be. Then comes construction. Bones need to be positioned carefully. The structure must be stable, must support its own weight plus the weight of hide coverings and accumulated snow. This requires understanding of basic engineering principles: load distribution, balance, stability. The hearth must be positioned precisely. Too close to the walls and bones might crack from heat. Too far and the structure isn't efficiently warmed. The builders achieved a configuration that maximized heat distribution while minimizing fire risk. And all of this sophisticated planning and execution happened 15,000 years ago by people we call cavemen. The term caveman is insulting. It's wrong. These were humans with the same cognitive capacity we have, solving engineering problems that would challenge modern people, creating structures that functioned effectively in conditions most of us couldn't survive for a day. But mammoth bone houses are just the beginning. Let me show you what else archaeologists found that proves Ice Age people were absolutely brilliant. In France, researchers discovered a shelter with a feature that shouldn't exist: a drainage system. Deliberately constructed channels that directed water away from the living space, preventing flooding during spring thaws. Someone understood hydrology. Someone observed water flow patterns and designed interventions that changed those patterns to protect the dwelling. In Germany, they found evidence of food storage pits dug into permafrost, creating natural freezers that preserved meat through winter. The pits were lined with stone and sealed with clay, creating temperature-stable environments that kept food from spoiling. Someone understood refrigeration principles. Someone figured out how to preserve resources across seasons, how to extend the usability of successful hunts, how to smooth out the feast or famine cycle. In Spain, they found remains of bedding platforms, raised sleeping surfaces constructed from wooden frames and packed with insulating materials, elevating sleepers above the cold ground, and significantly improving sleep quality and warmth retention. Someone understood thermal conductivity. Someone realized that cold rises from the ground and that elevation provides protection. Every single one of these innovations required observation, experimentation, and accumulated knowledge. Required someone like Kara noticing problems and testing solutions. Required generations of refinement and transmission. This is what makes me angry about how we portray ancient people in popular media. We show them as grunting brutes, as barely intelligent creatures who survive through luck and toughness. We're wrong. We're offensively, demonstrably wrong. These people were us. They had the same brains, the same capacity for innovation, the same ability to solve problems creatively. What they lacked wasn't intelligence, but accumulated knowledge, not cognitive ability, but technological heritage. If you took an Ice Age baby and raised them in a modern environment, they would be indistinguishable from any other child. They would learn to read, use computers, understand abstract mathematics. And if you took a modern baby and raised them in Ice Age conditions, assuming they survived, they would learn to read animal tracks, create fire from friction, and navigate by stars. Intelligence is constant, knowledge is variable, and the knowledge Ice Age people accumulated, the solutions they developed to survive in conditions that would kill most modern humans within hours, represents one of the greatest achievements in human history. So the next time you adjust your thermostat without thinking, remember, someone invented heating. Someone figured out insulation. Someone developed the principles that eventually led to the comfort you take for granted. And those someones lived 15,000 years ago in conditions you can barely imagine, creating solutions you depend on without knowing it. If this revelation about Ice Age genius fascinates you, hit that like button, and subscribe because the next mystery is even stranger. Chapter 9: The Great Shelter. Mystery. But there's something about Paleolithic shelters that nobody can explain, something that archaeologists have been arguing about for decades, something that doesn't make sense no matter how you look at it. Why did some bands build permanent structures while others didn't? I know that doesn't sound like a mystery. The obvious answer is that some locations were better for permanent habitation, some groups had better materials available, some were more innovative than others. Except the evidence doesn't support those obvious answers, because researchers have found locations where multiple bands occupied the same space at different times, but only some built elaborate structures. Same location, same resources, same climate, completely different approaches to shelter. In one case, archaeologists found evidence of 3 different occupations at the same rock shelter, spanning about 5,000 years. The first group made minimal modifications, just extending the natural overhang slightly with a simple hide wall. The second group, 2,000 years later, built an elaborate structure with stone walls, multiple rooms, sophisticated insulation, the works. They invested enormous labour in creating a comfortable, efficient dwelling. The third group, another 2,000 years later, returned to the minimal approach, simple hides, basic configuration, despite living in exactly the same location with access to the same materials and presumably the same climate conditions. Why? If the elaborate structure was so much better, why didn't everyone build that way? Why would a later group abandon successful innovations and revert to simpler methods? One theory is that the elaborate builders were planning to stay long-term, maybe permanently, while the simpler builders were just temporary residents who didn't want to invest labour in a place they'd soon abandon. But that doesn't explain why the second group stayed long-term in the first place. What made them decide to settle when other groups remained mobile? Another theory is that different cultures had different values about dwelling construction, that some groups simply cared more about shelter comfort, while others prioritised other things like portable possessions or elaborate clothing. But that raises more questions than it answers. In brutal Ice Age climates, why would any group not prioritise shelter? How did groups that didn't build warm structures survive, as well as groups that did? A third theory, more controversial, is that the elaborate builders had specific individuals like Kara who drove innovation, and when those individuals died, the knowledge was lost. Later groups didn't build elaborately because the expertise had vanished. This theory is disturbing because it suggests that technological progress was fragile, dependent on individuals, capable of being lost entirely. It suggests that humanity's advancement wasn't inevitable but contingent, that we could have easily stayed in the Ice Age for tens of thousands of years longer if the right people hadn't happened to exist at the right times. But maybe the most disturbing theory is this. Maybe the elaborate structures had serious drawbacks that outweighed their benefits. Think about it. Building a mammoth bone house takes months of effort. It requires dozens of people working together. It uses enormous amounts of resources, and once it's built, you're committed to that location. You can't easily move if game migrates, if conflicts arise with neighbouring groups, if conditions change. Mobility has value. The ability to pack up and relocate quickly might be more important than having a really warm shelter. Maybe the groups that built simple structures weren't less intelligent or innovative. Maybe they were making rational choices based on different survival strategies. Or maybe, and this is the truly strange possibility, maybe the elaborate structures were status symbols rather than practical necessities. Maybe building them was about demonstrating wealth and power and social cohesion, not about actual survival needs. Think about it. If you can afford to spend months collecting mammoth bones, if you can organise dozens of people for construction, if you can invest enormous labour in a permanent dwelling, you're announcing something to other groups. We are successful. We have surplus resources. We are powerful. The structure becomes a monument, a territorial marker, a statement of identity. But that would mean some Ice Age people were building essentially for show, for prestige, for social status rather than pure survival. It would mean that even 15,000 years ago, humans cared about more than just staying alive. They cared about how they were perceived, about their position relative to others, about legacy and meaning. That's both amazing and depressing. Amazing because it shows how deeply human these ancient people were. Depressing because it shows how ancient our worst impulses are, our tendency towards a competitive display and status seeking, even when survival is precarious. We don't know which theory is correct. We may never know. The archaeological record gives us structures but not motivations, objects but not intentions. But I want you to think about this mystery as you drift towards sleep. Think about why people make the choices they make. Think about whether your own choices are driven by survival or by something else, by status or meaning or legacy or fear. Why do you live where you live? Why do you work as hard as you do? Are you surviving or are you competing? Are you building shelter or building monuments? The Ice Age people faced these questions too, and their answers, like ours, were probably complicated, probably mixed practical needs with emotional ones, probably combined rational calculation with irrational desires. They were human, just like us, trying to survive, trying to put matter, trying to leave something behind. Chapter 10. The Hierarchy of Warmth. Let me tell you something uncomfortable about your shelter, something you've noticed but never questioned, something that reveals how Ice Age society really worked. Not everyone is equally cold. You sleep in the outer ring, where the fire's warmth barely reaches, where drafts find you, where cold is a constant companion. But Domar sleeps in his warm alcove. The elders sleep close to the hearth. The children are positioned carefully to maximize their warmth. This isn't random. This is hierarchy. And hierarchy, even in an Ice Age shelter, even when everyone is struggling to survive, creates deep moral questions that you live with every single night. Should warmth be distributed by need? The most vulnerable, the children and elderly, get priority. That makes sense, that's compassionate, that's what a decent society does. But Domar isn't vulnerable, he's a healthy adult, yet he sleeps warmer than you. Why? Because his spiritual services are valued, because the band believes his rituals matter. Is that fair? You work hard, you gather fuel, you maintain the shelter, you contribute tangible, measurable value. Domar performs ceremonies that may or may not do anything real, yet he sleeps better than you. Some nights, when the cold is particularly brutal, when your position in the outer ring feels like punishment, you think about this. You think about challenging it. You think about asking why Domar deserves his alcove when children are cold. But you don't. You never do, because challenging the hierarchy is dangerous. If you question Domar's privilege, you're questioning the entire system that justifies it. You're questioning the spirit's importance. You're questioning the band's core beliefs. And that could get you ostracized. Ostracism in Ice Age conditions is a death sentence. You cannot survive alone. You need the band, so you stay quiet. You accept your cold sleeping position. You maintain the hierarchy even though it feels unfair. This is how power works. Even in the smallest, most desperate human groups, even when everyone's survival hangs by a thread. Some people get more, and the people who get less accept it because the cost of resistance is too high. But here's where it gets complicated. Because the hierarchy isn't entirely unjustified. The elders do hold valuable knowledge. Their survival matters for the band's collective wisdom. The children do need warmth more urgently than adults. Their bodies lose heat faster, are more vulnerable to illness. And maybe Domar's rituals do provide value. Not through literal spiritual intervention, but through the psychological benefits of ceremony, the social cohesion created by shared belief, the confidence hunters gain from feeling blessed. If Domar's performances improve the band's effectiveness, if they reduce anxiety and increase cooperation, then maybe his privilege is earned. Maybe his contribution, though intangible, is real. Or maybe that's just how you rationalize accepting an unfair system because you have no choice. You'll never know, because there's no way to run the experiment. No way to see what would happen if Domar slept cold like you. If privileges were distributed differently, if the hierarchy was flattened, maybe the band would function better, more fairly, with better morale. Maybe it would fall apart, lose cohesion, fracture into competing factions. Human societies are complex systems. Change one variable and unpredictable effects ripple through everything else. So the hierarchy persists, and you accept it. And some nights that acceptance feels like wisdom, and some nights it feels like cowardice. And most nights you're too tired and cold to think about it at all. You just pull your furs tighter. Try to generate warmth through shivering, and wait for morning when the fire will be rebuilt and you'll have another day of labour that justifies your existence and earns your right to cold shelter and marginal food. This is survival. Not heroic, not noble, just grinding, complicated, morally ambiguous survival where everyone is doing their best with limited options and nobody, not even Domar in his warm alcove, is truly comfortable. Chapter 11. Survival Secrets Modern Science Discovered. I need to tell you about some recent discoveries that completely change our understanding of how your ancestors survived. In 2015, researchers analysing bone chemistry from Paleolithic remains made a shocking discovery. They found evidence of something that shouldn't exist: sophisticated nutritional knowledge that rivals modern dietary science. Specifically, they found that Ice Age people were deliberately combining foods to maximise nutrient absorption. For example, they were eating liver, which is rich in vitamin A, together with fats from bone marrow, which help vitamin A absorption. They were consuming plant foods high in vitamin C alongside smoked meat to enhance iron absorption. These aren't random combinations. These are deliberate pairings that suggest deep understanding of how nutrition works. How did they know this? They didn't have nutritional science. They didn't have laboratories or controlled studies, but they had observation. They noticed that certain food combinations made them feel stronger, healthier, more energetic, and they remembered those combinations, and they taught them to the next generation. This is empirical science. Observation, hypothesis, testing, transmission. The same process modern scientists use, just without the formal framework. But it gets even more impressive. In 2018, analysis of dental calculus, basically fossilized plaque, revealed that Ice Age people were using medicinal plants. Not just as food, but as targeted remedies for specific conditions. They found traces of yarrow, which has pain-relieving properties, poplar bark, which contains the chemical precursor to aspirin, chamomile, which reduces inflammation. These weren't food plants. They're bitter, unpleasant tasting. People only ate them for their medicinal effects. Someone figured out herbal medicine 15,000 years ago. Through patient observation, through trying different plants, through noticing which ones helped with which symptoms. This is pharmacology. Primitive pharmacology, yes, but pharmacology nonetheless. Your ancestors weren't just tougher than modern people. They weren't just surviving through brute endurance. They were smart, they were observant. They were accumulating knowledge and using it strategically to improve survival chances. But here's the most recent discovery, published just 2 years ago, that absolutely blew my mind. Researchers found evidence of deliberate parasite management. Ice Age people were using certain plants and practices specifically to control intestinal parasites. How do we know? Because they found seeds from plants that have powerful antiparasitic properties in concentrations that indicate intentional consumption, not accidental ingestion. Think about what this means. They understood invisible threats. They couldn't see parasites, didn't have microscopes, didn't understand germ theory. But they noticed that people who ate certain plants regularly had better health, and they made the connection. They developed preventive medicine, not just treating illness after it appeared, but taking actions to prevent illness from developing. This is public health thinking. This is epidemiology. 15,000 years before anyone had words for those concepts. I'm telling you all of this because I want to fundamentally change how you think about the past. We tend to imagine ancient people as ignorant, as stumbling through life without understanding as succeeding through luck and toughness, rather than intelligence and strategy. That image is completely false. Your ancestors were brilliant. They solved problems we couldn't solve in the same conditions. They developed knowledge that modern people with all our technology struggle to rediscover. When modern survival experts try to replicate Ice Age survival techniques, they fail constantly. They can't start fires as efficiently. They can't create shelters as warm. They can't process hides as effectively. Why? Because the ancient techniques were refined over thousands of years, were developed through countless experiments and failures, represent accumulated wisdom that we've lost. We're not smarter than our ancestors. We're just luckier. We inherited their innovations. We stand on their shoulders. We benefit from millennia of accumulated knowledge that they paid for with suffering and death. Every time you take medicine, you're using knowledge that began with someone 15,000 years ago chewing bitter plants and noticing that their pain decreased. Every time you eat a balanced meal, you're benefiting from observations about food combinations that began in Ice Age shelters. Every time you live through winter without dying from cold, you're protected by insulation principles that Kara and people like her discovered through desperate experimentation. Your comfort is built on their suffering. Your knowledge is built on their observations. Your survival is built on their innovations. So if you feel grateful for that, if you feel connected to these ancient innovators who made your life possible, show it by subscribing, by liking, by sharing this story with others who need to understand how remarkable our ancestors were. Chapter 12, The Final Winter. Let me bring you back now. Back to the shelter. Back to your cold sleeping position in the outer ring. Back to the moment before sleep finally comes. The fire has burned down to coals again. The shelter is dark except for that faint red glow. Around you the band sleeps, Domar in his alcove, the elders near the hearth, the children wrapped and protected, Kara somewhere in the darkness, probably still half awake, still listening for problems, and you, anonymous member of an anonymous band living a life that will never be remembered, dying a death that will leave no trace. In 15,000 years, someone might excavate this shelter. They might find your bones if you're lucky, if conditions preserve them. But they'll never know your name, never know your thoughts, never know what you felt on this cold night as you struggled to sleep. You'll be archaeological evidence, a data point, one individual in the vast sweep of Paleolithic humanity. Does that bother you? That you'll be forgotten? That your struggles and triumphs and small moments of joy will vanish as if they never existed? Or is there something comforting in it? In knowing that your burdens are temporary, that your pain will end, that you're part of something vast and ongoing that continues long after you're gone. The cold presses in. You pull your furs tighter. Outside, wind moans across the frozen landscape, the same wind that's moaned for 100,000 years, that will moan for 100,000 more. But inside, warmth persists, fragile, inadequate, but real. The fire's glow continues. The shelter holds. The band breathes together, connected by shared vulnerability, shared struggle, shared determination to see morning. This is what your life is. Not glory, not fame, not wealth, or power, or achievement. Just this, just survival, just making it through one more night so you can face one more day, and somehow, incredibly, that's enough. Because morning will come, the fire will be rebuilt, the band will continue. The cold will persist, but so will human warmth, human ingenuity, human refusal to surrender. Kara will check the walls again. Domar will perform morning rituals. The elders will share stories. The children will play despite the cold. And you will gather fuel and process food and maintain your small part in the vast machinery of survival. This is humanity's story, has always been, will always be, not the story of individuals but of continuation, not the story of perfection but of persistence, not the story of comfort but of creating small rebellions against chaos and cold and death. You close your eyes, your breathing slows, the cold surrounds you but cannot quite reach you because you are held by furs woven by human hands, warmed by fire, maintained by human effort, protected by shelter designed by human minds. You are alone but not alone, anonymous but part of something vast, temporary but contributing to something permanent. You are surviving, and survival in the end is everything. Sleep now, sleep deeply. Let the story settle over you like snow, like fur, like the accumulated warmth of 15,000 years of human effort to stay alive, to stay warm, to create comfort in the cold darkness. Let the ancient fires burn in your dreams. Let Kara's innovations protect you. Let the band's breathing surround you. You're safe enough, you are warm enough, you are, for this moment, at peace. And tomorrow, if tomorrow comes, will bring its own challenges and its own small victories. But that's tomorrow's concern. Tonight, there is only rest, only the soft descent into darkness, only the eternal human struggle to survive one more winter, and the knowledge that somehow, impossibly, we survive. We persist, we continue. Good night, ancient traveller. Good night, modern dreamer. Good night to everyone who ever sought warmth in the cold. May you sleep well. May you wake warm. May you survive the winter of your soul.